Hani was born on June 28, 1942 in Transkei, completed his senior certificate at the Lovedale Institute, Alice, attended Fort Hare and graduated from Rose University in 1962 with a BA in English and Latin. Hani joined the African National Congress Youth League in 1957 while at school in Lovedale and was suspended from Fort Hare University for his involvement in protest politics. The African National Congress had been banned in 1960, and in 1962, Hani joined its military wing, Mkondo Wesizwe, otherwise known as MK, and became a member of its Western Cape leadership. He was arrested in late 1962 under the Suppression of Communism Act, and he was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but was released on bail pending an appeal. When the appeal was turned down in early 1963, he escaped the country to undergo military training. In 1974, the year in which he was elected to the ANC's National Executive, Hani was instructed by the African National Congress to enter South Africa to establish a political infrastructure for the African National Congress in the Cape. He then moved on to Lesotho, where in 1981 an attempt was made on his life when an explosive device was placed in the car he was using. He survived another assassination attempt the following year. In 1983, Hani took part in the suppression of a mutiny by MK dissidents in the training camps, but Hani denied in later years that he participated in the arrests, killings and torture that followed. In 1987, he took over from Joe Slovo as Chief of Staff of MK, responsible for its day-to-day operations. After the ANC was unbanned in February 1980, Hani re-entered South Africa under temporary indemnity, which the government renewed later that year, only after protests from the African National Congress. Immediately after entering South Africa, Hani was vocal enough to tell the whole world that the African National Congress was for a peaceful settlement in South Africa.
I support negotiations because the ANC supports negotiations. But negotiations do not say the people must not struggle.
Hani caused a furor when he indicated that despite talks with the government, a seizure of power could not be ruled out if whites were not prepared to give up power. When the SACP was relaunched as a legal body in July 1990, Hani was named as a member of its 22-person interim leadership group. In 1991, he was named as the front-runner to Thabo Mbeki for the ANC's deputy presidency, but he withdrew in favor of a compromise candidate, Walter Sisulu. Hani was, however, re-elected to the National Executive and chosen to the NEC's Working Committee. He was also tipped in political circles as a successor to the ANC's President Nelson Mandela. No doubt that his fame in South Africa was popular, second to that one of Nelson Mandela.
He was not a poet. He was not a shopkeeper. He was not a musician. He was a revolutionary. He was a politician for his own people. The hand that pulled the trigger is merely a hand. Obviously, there are greater forces which are challenging Hani for who he is. And I've told you that he was not what he was not. He was who he is.
In December 1991, he backed directives from the ANC and MK by taking over from the ailing Joe Slovo as the General Secretary of the SACP, South African Communist Party. In April the following year, he quit as MK Chief of Staff. Hani was fond of reading romantic poets like Keats and Shelley, which he finds as a handy way to fly away from the trials and troubles of this world. However, Shakespeare remains his favorite author. Chris Hani is survived by his wife Dimpa, and the couple had 3 children. The nation will also remember Chris Hani for the message which he delivered in Davidton calling for peace.
We think that people who are fighting against peace and who are disrupting the peace processes should be isolated, I would say isolated politically. Because in order for us to reach a negotiated settlement where we shall have elections, we need all of us to campaign for peace rather than to raise the issue of war. We feel that we've fought in this country in the past, and that fighting has resulted into a situation where all those who were involved in that fight are sitting down and discussing and talking basically about the need to install, transitional executive councils and to prepare for elections as early as next year.
He also survived the Bisho massacre, which left scores of people dead, one of the biggest peaceful marches he ever led inside South Africa. Barely 38 hours after appearing on a TNP production calling for peace, he was assassinated.
Mashole a umkhonto wesizwe a emi mulamula gore ba tla ba khone go ntsha setlopo sa moetapele wa bona ba shetši ba thomile go gwanta gomme lekese le a gogwa dikgare di a tsošwa ka godimo ga hese šiba le ba batametši bo raditaba ba bega ditaba šiba le ba batametši ba lentšha lekese la moetapele wa South African Communist Party ke tla nama ke lefe nnoqolo kgurua thupuo.
Xa kanye bewuphethe umkhumbi kaChris Hani mawethu, ndithanda nje kunikhumbuza ukuba ipolitiki kusapho lwakwaHani ndingatsho ndithi ibisisonga semihla ngemihla, kuthiwa intshutshiso ukungcungcuthekiswa kwaqala kanye kutata kamfi uChris, kangangokuba wanyanzeleka naye asabe umsindo wabacinezeli, walishiya eli ngonyaka ka-1962 wabuya ngo-1991 ebeselisuthu lonke lo xesha.
And there you saw the coffin itself being removed out of the back of the hearse with a cadre of Umkhonto weSizwe men. Just in front of it, behind it at the present moment on your shot, a satin pillow with one MK hat, reflecting, of course, the fight for power, the fight, the struggle, and now the fight towards democratization in our country. Nelson Mandela on the stage just a couple of moments ago, looking slightly worried, maybe perhaps slightly haggard. As we entered the stadium this morning, there were repeated calls for calm after reports infiltrated the stadium about conditions outside, reports of stonings and the burning of houses outside the stadium. Inside the stadium, though, things are relatively quiet, very peaceful, as everybody pays tribute and respects the memories of this great man.
Bagare ba tšwela pele ke ba Umkhonto weSizwe ba swere mongwe ka bona ke lekese la morena Chris Hani, monna yo a boletšego khutšo matšatši a mane pele ga letlho la gagwe le lebego le sa letelwa. Le a bona lešaba le letletšego mo ga gona leina kgoboko goba leina go kwa ke gore a collective noun ya nnete ye nka kgonang go išomišetša lona ke mashaba-shaba. I could say it's multitudes, not so, Paul?
Definitely, I couldn't agree with you more. It's also one of the most electrifying events to sit at and watch. We are just slightly above the crowd at the present moment in commentary booths that are usually used for commentating on great sport events that take place here, some of the biggest soccer matches ever. Who ever thought that the FNB Stadium would be used for this very auspicious occasion, the funeral of Chris Hani? NK are very slowly moving the body and the coffin itself towards a red carpet which stands just in front of them under a little tent, and shortly thereafter the program of the day's events will begin. The sermon itself will be delivered by Archbishop Desmond Tutu a little bit later on. Looking at it from the air, it is quite a sight. The stadium itself is full. There, from where we sit, is hardly an empty seat. The stairs themselves are pretty full, especially up in the higher areas, and down on the pitch themselves there are thousands of people paying their tributes.
Isale banna ga se ka ka bona le shaba la batho ba ba ka ruri go bontšha ga botsebotse gore mokgapo mogolo o wele thagatsalla botsororo batho ba batletšego moo ba tswa khutlong tše nne tša lefase ga se pheteletšo batho ba ke ba bantšintšintši mo e leng gore ga go tlhalosege le ga tee re a bona morena Mandela ke ola president ya mokgatlo wa ANC o eme se re se bitša gore ke attention ka sekgowa o eme attention le morena Sisulu kgauswi le yena ba lebeletše mašole a Umkhonto we Sizwe mofumagadi wa morena Chris Hani o setwa go feta situ ke situ nka se re botletše batho ba bantši filo moo ke dilo di sepela ka thelelo ke tlhompho yeo ba e laetšago le go efa moetapele e le mongwale dipharephare wa South African Communist Party morena Chris Hani ka o ba xelele tata wethu noxolo.
Ewe mawethu nanko uDimpho unxiba umnqwazi omnyama inkosikazi kaChris Hani ke leyo ecaleni kwakhe unkosikazi kaOliver Tambo. Ewe mawethu le ndimbane benibonile ngaphambili apha sitshilo sathi iyangqina into yokokuba uChris Hani ebeliqhawe lamaqhawe kunjalo nje bathe khunu bembe uthe zole.
Amala! Comrades, we have lost one of the greatest liberation fighters in our history, Comrade Chris Hani. Chris Hani was one of the best loved leaders in our land. And his death has left a gap which it will be difficult to fill. But he has also left us with a wonderful legacy. This legacy will help speed us on the way to the kind of society he lived and died for. To Dimpo, his wife, to his parents, to his children, to his whole family, we say, you share this irreplaceable loss with all our people. Comrades, the assassin, the killer, and those who are behind him thought that they had killed a man and the things he stood for. But without intending to, they have mobilized the greatest army our country has ever seen, an army for democracy that has risen up across the face of our country in the past week. Comrade Chairperson, who killed Chris Hani? Who killed Chris Hani? Let me say, it was not just the brute who pulled the trigger that killed Chris Hani. He was killed by a system that turns people into animals. Comrades, he was killed by a system which has made our own people foreigners in our land, a system which opened its arms to thugs from Eastern Europe who killed one of our best sons. And comrades, remember this, the man who has been arrested for killing Chris Hani, he had the vote, but Chris Hani and Mandela have still not got the vote. Comrades, who was Chris Hani? Who was this man that stirred such fears in the ranks of the apartheid regime? Who was this man so greatly loved, so greatly admired here in our country, and not only in our country but all over the world? Who was he? He was born in poverty in Kofimbaba in the Transkei. His father was a migrant worker on the mines. His mother, a simple peasant who had never been to school. Both are here amongst us today. And let me say, viva the parents of Chris Hani, viva! These were Comrade Hani's roots. And the reason why he was so great is that although he had become a big national and international leader, he never forgot these roots. For Comrade Hani, the struggle was not about his personal career. The struggle was for the poorest of the poor. He struggled for the workers, for the shack dwellers, for the peasants without land, for the children without shoes. It was for the cause of the workers and the poor that Comrade Chris took up arms. It is for them that he crossed the Zambezi with Umkhonto we Sizwe to fight in the Wankie campaign in 1967. Viva Umkhonto we Sizwe, viva! It was for this cause of the poor that he was the first member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress in the 1970s to return to South Africa and operate in the underground. Comrades, Chris Hani always led from the front. He led from the front in Umkhonto we Sizwe. He led from the front in the underground. And he led from the front at Bishu last year. Chris was not a headquarters leader. He was a field commander, not in the military sense. He never expected anyone to do anything that he himself was not prepared to do. And he was a most wonderful combination. Chris was an intellectual, but he could speak the language of the poor. Chris knew how to lead, but he also knew how to follow the mood of the people. Chris was a revolutionary who did not confuse revolution with noise. For him, revolution was not just noise. And Hani would have told those who join into our mass action in order to break into shops in order to burn motor cars, he would have told them that they are doing the work of the enemy. Chris was neither a hawk nor a dove. When the time came to fight, he fought like a tiger. When a peaceful way became possible, he had the courage to say so. And let me say this, Comrade Chairperson, that those, whether in our organization or whether they are out of our organization, those who see killing as the only answer can never step into Hani's shoes. Hani was not a demagogue. Hani did not say things just to get a cheer. He was always sensitive to popular feeling, but he never pandered to it. And by nature, Chris was the most peaceful, the most humane person. He hated unnecessary violence and cruelty. And he hated most of all racist violence, whether against black or white. Comrades, when a great man dies, everyone wants to claim him for themselves. But let us never forget that above all, above everything else, Chris Hani was a communist. He was a true communist. He stood for democratic, humane socialism. For him, communism wasn't only a theory, it wasn't only big words. For him, communism was jobs for the jobless, homes for the homeless, a living wage for the workers, hope for the youth, a life of dignity for the old, free health care and decent education for us all. This is what he stood for, and this is what he died for. And throughout the world, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world, for the wretched of our earth, the party which Hani led has become a shining beacon. Let us honor the memory of our fallen comrade, and let us build a powerful Communist Party. Viva South African Communist Party, viva! Viva South African Communist Party, viva! Comrade Chairperson, Chris Hani had a dream. He had a dream. They killed the man, but they can never kill the dream. And that dream, which Chris Hani had, is about to become a reality. Viva the memory of Chris Hani, viva! Viva the memory of the greatest fighter for the workers and the poor, viva! Viva the South African Communist Party, viva! Viva the African National Congress, viva! Viva COSATU, viva! Viva Umkhonto we Sizwe, viva! Comrade Chris, you have died for all of us. Comrade Chris, in all of us, your struggle lives on. Hambagashli, Kabani, Amandla, Amandla, Amandla.
Silindeleke ukuba basixelele isithethi esilandelayo utsho kwavokotheka uJoe Slovo.
Comrades, before we ask President Nelson Mandela to address us, we're going to ask Comrade Mzwakhe to come forward.
One of South Africa's most well-known and respected poets is now taking to the stage rather unexpectedly.
Amandla, the doyen of democracy, Christus Sithembisile Hani, from Kofimbaba to Boksburg, from Pretoria to Boksburg, waluza jalus uluzile mbulalindini. Chris Thembisile the doyen of democracy and freedom, the doyen against divisions and destruction. Chris Thembisile the doyen, ubungelona ivaga sonke siyazi. When you erect the monument for Chris, let the architects of this art of murder belong to the dustbin of history. Yes, the museum of shame. My faith has been stretched to the limit. Optimism has lost its meaning. Life has gone beyond the limits of taste, and the people have been pushed into overcrowded graveyards in South Africa. Human slaughter is not an act of heroism. How peaceful is the road to democracy when peace-loving South Africans have fallen? South Africa, my home, you are different to me. A home of anguish and sorrow. A day in, day out, you are to me like a forest that elects dangerous lions and mambas. How peaceful is the road to democracy? Is it peace with apartheid? Is it peace under apartheid? Is it peace without justice? Is it peace without democracy? United Nations, how long? United Nations, how long? How many more must die? Brutal murder, massacres. We have witnessed the death of Comrade Kisani. Now is the time to violate the 11th commandment, for today's pain is tomorrow's imminent comfort. Now is the time. Yes, it is the time. The crocodiles. I am the product of hunger. I am the product of social injustice. I represent victims of tyranny. I come from apartheid land. I reside for a nation. I represent a nation, a peace-loving nation, a nation that never enjoyed freedom. Since conquest, my land is blood-stained. From time immemorial, human corpses have replaced pockets of cement in building the future of the post-apartheid land. Nevertheless, no oppressive kingdom is eternal. How hard and tormenting it is to write about pain and not joy. How hard and tormenting it is to write about slavery and not freedom. When shall I write about the daffodils? How can I write about the beauty of nature when the ground is daily soaked with the blood of the innocent? Nevertheless, no oppressive kingdom is eternal. The people are like crocodiles in the river, and no one can find crocodiles inside the river. South Africa, why therefore buy time when crocodiles are against you? Why give chase to lizards when crocodiles are against you? The minority cannot rule over the majority forever. When the world is for justice and peace, South Africa is for reforms. When ancient slavery was abolished, the slaves were set free. When past law was declared abolished, freedom-loving South Africans remained in bondage. Nevertheless, the dive of peace also belongs to us in the South. No regime can press over a hot elite of a boiling pot forever. The tradition of no surrender is the name of the game to total emancipation. The tradition of no surrender is the name of the game to total democracy. Okulimala ko, I give you the last one. Okulimala ko muntu. Okulimala ko muntu. Okulimala ko mdeni. Okulimala ko mdeni. Okulimala ko mphakathi. Ngivumela ngikhulume olwami ulimi ngalugoqene kungana wakhamehle ngayiboni mina lento ngiyibona ingabe usufaniswa nesimungulu na. Ngivumela ngikubuze kungani uthule izingane zibhubha ingabe usufaniswa nesimungulu na. Kungani ubhinqa uhlekasizo siphela elinjalo legazi kumele lichitheke ukuze bona siyabulawa siqindezele. Ngivumela ngisho ulimele ingqondo ngakho limaza sizo sonkana yazi yalimala ingqondo umuntu ehamba yazi yalimala ingqondo umuntu ephila usungumhambuma abaningazibulisa kudala usungumhambuma abaningazibulisa kuqala. Ngivumela ngiqedele yami inkondlo musa kumangala musa kwethuka. Kungani nenhliziyo encane ekhaya kepha emsebenzini ngayikho? Kunini nje kubangani bakho namandla awubona ngani ukuthi yivaka makhona ndini? Kunini lihlezi lisonke izandla? Yini lena yenza ingapheli? Yini lena yenza ibambekayo? Makhona ndini vukani zonke izithotobala sezishintshile.
umsindisi wakhe mbuli lowo iciko lokwenene.
Amandla akenika handle. Amandla. Now I can hear you. Comrade chairpersons, to the family, our daughter-in-law, Dimple, and grandchildren, Neo, Namakwezi, and Lindiwe, to Gilbert and Mary Hani, the parents of Chris, to Dusha and Kosana, Chris's older and younger brothers, to commanders, commissioners, and soldiers of Umkhonto weSizwe, distinguished participants in this solemn occasion, to the tens of thousands of you, both here in the stadium, those gathered already at the graveside, and all participating in memorial services throughout the country. We have come here to pay our last respects to one of the greatest revolutionaries this country has ever known. I ask you all to rise for a moment's silence in tribute to his memory. Even as we do so, let us also remember those who have died in the last few days and hours here at F&B, at Sebokeng, Vanderbijl Park, and elsewhere during these days of mourning. Thank you. Sabalele in Kofinvaba district is a place well known to me, not for its beauty, but for its harshness. No running water, no electricity, no decent housing, inadequate health care, legal formal education. Yet this small, virtually unknown village produced a Chris Hani, whose life shook the whole country and impacted on the world stage. Chris Hani's passion for justice, for addressing the problems that plague the rural poor, were rooted in his childhood in Sabalele. His roots were so deep, so true, that he never lost them. Through decades of exile, Chris Hani remained steadfast in his commitment to free our people from slavery. Fated in many capitals of the world, he never succumbed to the glamour and glitter that was offered him. He was taken to our hearts as a people, as a nation, because he lived so that we may be free. Chris Hani touched at the very heart of millions of us because he knew our pain and eased it by giving us hope, giving us courage, giving us a way forward. Chris Hani o ne a rata bophelo ebile a rata go phela fela o ne a rata tokologo le go feta. Chris Hani o ne a rata batho ba rona, lekgotla la rona, setšhaba sa rona sa Afrika Borwa. Ka baka la lerato leo o bolailwe jaaka phoofolo. Yesterday, thousands of you filed past his coffin to pay your last respects. Like me, I am sure that upon leaving, you had difficulty holding back the tears. Chris Hani's medal was no aberration. It was consistent with the patterns of the past. Scores of assassinations remain unsolved. Baphi or Richard Turner, Matthew Goniwe, Sparrow Mkondo, David Webster, Ruth First, no Dulcie September. Ithetha ngabantu abambalwa. Ababulali balamaqhawe kuthiwa abaziwe. Why? They remained unnamed because the criminals investigate themselves. Kodwa ngokubulala uChris Hani, izigebenga abagwinti benze imposiso engumangaliso. Chris Hani will not become just a statistic. The regime has announced the arrest of a leading member of the Conservative Party, Clive W. Lewis, in connection with this matter. We insist he be brought before the courts without delay. We insist, we demand to know what he did, who he worked with, and above all, we demand justice. We do not want to see a situation where those arrested for such heinous crimes simply go free once the hue and cry dies down, as has happened in the past. In 1991, when we spoke of a third force being responsible for the violence, we were ridiculed and criticized by everyone. Now both South Africa and the world recognize not only the existence of that same third force, but also the extent of its activities. That is why Mr. de Klerk, retired army and police generals with golden handshakes, but neither we nor the country know what activities they were dismissed for. When Chris Hani criticized the theft of weapons from the Air Force base and said those weapons were not stolen, but were taken to be used in covert operations, he too was ridiculed. Guns from those same stolen weapons were used to kill him. This secret web of hitmen and covert operations is funded by our taxes, while we remain without homes, without food, without education. Almost 9 billion rand was spent in the last 2 years on these secret operations. But we, the taxpayers, do not know what it was spent on. We only know that our people continue to die in violence on the trains, in massacres, and by assassination. The killing must stop. A major initiative that Chris Hani proposed shortly before his death was that peace brigades be established under the National Peace Accord. Let us pay tribute to his memory by forming such peace brigades throughout the country. Let them be part of the reconstruction of our country, ravaged by the war waged against us over 45 years of apartheid rule. Let Chris Hani live on through all of us. To the Hani family, you have suffered a loss that no amount of tears can replace. The ANC and South African Communist Party have lost a giant of struggle. But perhaps the greatest loss is to South Africa as a whole. Now and in the future, for our country has been deprived of the wisdom, courage, and insight that was unique to Chris Hani. I would also like to address a final word to Chris himself, comrade, friend, and confidant. We work together in the National Executive Committee of the ANC. We had vigorous debates and an intense exchange of ideas. You were completely unafraid. No task was too small for you to perform. Your ready smile and warm friendship was a source of strength and companionship. You lived in my home, and I loved you like the true son you were. In our hearts, as in the heart of all our people, you are irreplaceable. We have been struck a blow that wounds so deeply that the scars will remain forever. You laid down your life so that we may know freedom. No greater sacrifice is possible. We lay you to rest with the pledge that the day of freedom you live and died for will dawn. We all owe you a debt that can only be repaid through the achievement of the liberation of our people, which was the passion of your life. Fighter, revolutionaries, soldier for peace, we mourn deeply for you. You will remain in our hearts forever. Amandla, Martha.
Abstain. I bring messages of sympathy and condolence from the Archbishop of Canterbury, from the presiding bishop of the Anglican Church in the United States, and the Archbishop of Ireland. St. Paul, in the letter to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 31, says, "If God be for us, who can be against us? We have come to bury a great son of the soil." Is there anyone here who doubts that Chris was a great son of the soil? I don't hear you. Is there anyone here who doubts that Chris was a great son of our soil? But of course, you will then hear people say, no. He was a communist. I want to say, I loved him. I loved him for his warmth and his laughter. At Bishop, he stood next to me as we were singing Lizalise Idingalako. And he belted it out with a wonderful baritone, singing all the verses off by heart. And then at the end I asked him, "Hey, Chris, how can a communist sing and sing so lustily a Christian hymn?" And he laughed as he alone can laugh. Whether he was a communist or not, certainly he was dedicated to peace, to reconciliation, to negotiation. In the very week of his death, he was speaking about Peace Corps, speaking about how everyone must become a combatant for peace. He was a man of transparent integrity. For when he advocated peace, it was not because he was a coward. He had been head of the MK. But it was because of his integrity that when circumstances changed, he would change his position even if it might lose him support. We have a crazy country with people obsessed with their anti-communism. If a communist were to say, "Hey, it is raining outside, don't go out, you will get wet," then they expect everybody else to say, no. A communist has said, "You are going to get wet." You must say, "No, you won't get wet because it is communist rain." For us, he was a hero and a great leader, irrespective of whether he was a communist or not. After all, as we have said before, those who oppressed us were not communists. We were oppressed by those who claimed to be Christians, such as we are. Those who invented apartheid apartheid were not communists. They were Christians. And remember, when they wanted to praise Mr. de Klerk in recent times for suggesting the initiatives of change, then they said, as a form of high praise, oh, Mr. de Klerk is the Gorbachev of Southern Africa. And Gorbachev was a communist. And they were claiming him as a form of praising. Dear friends, we have come to bury our hero, our leader, a man of peace, a man of justice and reconciliation, a man for negotiation. Chris Hani died on the most sacred weekend of the Christian calendar. Chris died between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Let us recall that God extracted out of the death of Jesus Christ a great victory, the victory of life over death, that God showed in the victory of Jesus that goodness is stronger than evil, that light is stronger than darkness, that life is stronger than death, that love is stronger than hate. God is telling us the same message in the horrible death of Chris Hani. His death is not a defeat. His death is our victory. We, all of us, black and white, all of us are going to live in peace and justice and friendliness in this country. And so, dear friends, we commit ourselves, each one of us, we commit ourselves to discipline. We commit ourselves to peace. We commit ourselves to negotiation and reconciliation. For we are the rainbow people of God. We are unstoppable. Nobody can stop us on our march to victory. Nobody. No guns. Nothing. Nothing will stop us, for we are moving to freedom. We are moving to freedom. And nobody can stop us, for God is on our side. And so, we lift our hands. We raise our hands and we say, we will be free. All of us. Black and white together. We will be free. All of us. Black and white together. Oh, we are marching to freedom.
Comrades, we are not going to have a family speaker. The family will speak as they bury their loved one at the cemetery. What we now have to do at this point is to read two messages. One from Ausdimpo, Comrade Chris Hani's wife. It reads as follows. Muratua Waka, we have had 19 glorious years together in the service of our people and the nation. Your life has all been dedicated and lived for the struggle. The children and I accepted and understood this. You were able to carry out all your duties because you had a solid family base. I want to say to you, the struggle is not yet over. And I urge you to fight even more vigorously from where you are. Lastly, I want to remind you that I loved you, I still love you, and I will always love you. She continues with a message to all of us. She says that, please do not let my husband's blood to be spilled in vain. Robala ka khotso, mofumahadi wa hao dimpho. The second message is from the children. Darling Daddy, we, your 3 daughters, whom you were always so proud of, want to say to you, thanks for all the love, the care, and the cheer you brought us up with. You will always be in our hearts forever. Lots of love, hugs, and kisses. Neo, Kwezi, and Lindy.
crowds are bursting at the seams at the present moment as more and more and more people stream in to the South Park Cemetery here in Ellis Park for the funeral. There you see in front of you the actual area that has been allotted to Chris Hani, with the red carpet leading out in front of it, leads to just behind where the hearse is at the moment. There seem to be flowers and forever flowers coming out of the back of the hearse at the moment, with almost every single person standing in front of the area just behind the hearse holding a bunch of beautiful yellow, red or white flowers. The coffin itself has not yet been taken out of the hearse, although they now are moving forward as I speak towards the hearse itself to actually take the coffin out to move it over to the actual grave site. Most of the tens of thousands of people that are gathered here today are unable to actually witness the event that they've come to see. But I think they all realize one thing, and that is that Chris Hani is no more. Well, not mortally anyway. His remains are about to be interred in the ground, but judging by the reaction of the crowds in front of right where we are at the moment, his spirit will live on forever, and this will become a day in the freedom fight, a day in the fight for peace. And they're very prevalent in the shots. You see the MK cap, and now the ceremony itself begins.
Lord Jesus Christ, by your own 3 days in the tomb, you hallowed the graves of all who believe in you, and so made the grave a sign of hope that promises resurrection even as it claims our mortal bodies. Grant that our brother may sleep here in peace until you awaken him to glory. For you are the resurrection and the life. Then he will see you face to face, and in your light will see light and know the splendor of God. We remind you, Lord, that Chris, in his last few days of life, spoke publicly about peace and love and doing away with violence. And we ask you, in your mercy, to look upon him now as you looked upon the face of your only Son, Jesus Christ, who died that peace might come to the world. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Setopo sa Chris Hani se a hlohonolofatswa jwalo ka e le tlwaelo hara maloko a kereke ya Roma e Katoliki. Mme Dimpho Hani ke eo a atamela.
And there each member of the family moves slowly forward to sprinkle holy water on, in this case, her father.
Ngokwesiko lamaRoma mawethu niyabona abantwana nomama namalungu ekhaya bafafaza umzimba ibhokisi kaKristu ngamanzi athandazelweyo, amanzi angcwele, namanye amalungu ekhaya ayalandela, ngokunjalo nonkosikazi Oliver Tambo, Adelaide Tambo.
It's Adelaide Tambo, the wife of Oliver. Very, very sad moment for her, and a sad moment, of course, for the family as well.
Njengoko uThixo namandla onke ambizileyo umzalwana wethu uChris wamsusa kobubomi, sibuyisela umzimba wakhe eluthulweni lomhlaba apho wawuvela khona. uKristu waba ngowokuqala owavuka kwabafileyo, kwaye nathi siyazi ukuba uya kuyivusa imizimba yethu ekufeni ibe njengaye ngobuqaqawuli. Ngoko ke sinikela umzalwana wethu ezandleni zenkosi. Yanga inkosi ingamamkela eluxolweni lwayo ize imvuse ngomhla wokugqibela.
masithandazele umzalwana wethu uChris. Sithandaze kuKristu uYesu inkosi yethu. Othi ndim uvuko ndim ubomi. Lowo ukholwayo kum wodla ubomi nokuba ebefile. Wonke odla ubomi ekholwa kum soze afe naphakade. Nkosi njengokuba wamlilelayo umhlobo wakho uLazaro akuba eswelekile. Sithuthuzele kwinhlungu esikuyo. Thuthuzela umzi wakwaHani. Uthuthuzele amaqabane akhe. Uthuthuzele isizwe sonke saseMzantsi Afrika. Sithuthuzele thina bashiwe ngumzalwana wethu. Ukholo lwethu malusithuthuzele, ithemba lethu libe kubomi obungunaphakade. Konke oku Baba sikucela ngokholo olomeleleyo kuwe. Sikucela ngoKristu inkosi yethu. Amen. Uphumlo olungunaphakade zumphe lona Nkosi, nokhanyo olungapheliyo malumkhanyisele. Makaphumle ngoxolo. Amen. Umphefumlo wakhe nayo yonke imiphefumlo yamakholwa abhubhileyo ngethahu likaThixo mayiphumle ngoxolo. Amen.
Silence from the crowd as the flag is ceremoniously lifted and folded by MK to be handed over to Dimpho Hani.
Kuthezole mawethu ndiyabona uba abantu bayazetyisa zonke iintetho eziwiswe kubo namhlanje ndawonye nenkqubo yanamhlanje. Kusongwa iflags ngoku ziza kunikezelwa ngokusesikweni kunkosikazi kamfi uDimpho Hani.
The Hani family are not unaccustomed to death. Chris had already survived 2 attempts on his life, and they had spoken about it fairly regularly in their home. But the shock of actually putting him into the ground is still something that a human being suffers with tragedy. Standing in front of the microphone now, Jay Naidu.
Memofumadi wa mofu Dimpho Hani o ne a phonyiwe ka sobana la nale ka selemo sa 1981 ha SADF e ne futuhela Lesotho mme ba habile hlooho ya Hani.
And so the flags are handed over and a silent statement is made.
Mofumahadi ya sebete ya amohetseng tsena tsohle ka maikutlo a phethahetseng.
The MK cap on the silk or satin pillow, reflecting, of course, the fight, the battle, and the membership that Chris had in Umkhonto we Sizwe. Sitting just behind Dimpho, see the face of Nelson Mandela, looking rather solemn at this particular occasion.
Ndiqinisekile elithuba kuDimpho linzima kakhulu, ithuba lokubana amkele izinto eziluphawu lomsebenzi womyeni wakhe.
Ke lona le tshwele le bokaneng kwano mona. mme ke le tshwele le tshwanetseng hore le thoholetswe ka hohle hohle ka boitshwaro ba lona bo babatsehang ho fihlela mothating wa hona jwale ntle le ho diketsahalo tse mmalwanyana fela tsa hoseng ha bane ba otla toitoi ha ile motsotsong wa hona jwale tjena le tshwele lena le kwano.
Comrades, can we ask all of us to stand up so that we can for the last moment Ti
The 21 gun salute is complete. Stop your fire. Thank you, comrades. Thank you.
A rather moving moment as the white doves of peace were allowed free by the family of the late Chris Hani.
Ukuba uluthuli waye uyabuyela eluthulini umzimba uhlwayelwa unokonakala uvuka ungasenokwanakala uhlwayelwa umzimba ongowemvelo kuvuke umzimba ongowomoya uphumlo olungunaphakade ziumphelona Nkosi nokhanyo olungapheliyo malumkhanyisele makaphumle ngoxolo amen.
Ke maebana a supang letshwao la kgotso ao mofu Chris Hani a bolokwang ho ona borokong ba hae ba qetelo mme e se ka moya wa Hani o ka fumana phomolo moo a leng teng empa dikgopolo tsa Chris Hani di phediswe ka ho sa feleng ho fihlela bohle baahi ba Afrika Borwa ba fumana seo Hani a ileng a se emela bophelong ba hae mme o bile a tela bophelo ba hae mme dipuo tsa hae di ne di mo paka hore o tla tela bophelo ba hae ha fela kgotso e ka ba teng ho setse ho rona ba phelang hore motsotsong ona wa kajeno e be ke letsatsi la history mme ke pale hore letsatsi lena le keke la lebaleha la hlakuwa dikelellong tsa rona bohle ke tlamehile ho tlotla ke fellwa ke mantswe ho ba tsamaisitseng mosebetsi ona ka teng jwalo ka ha ba ntse ba phetha ditokelo tsa ho qetela tse tlwaelehileng ditshebeletsong tsena tsa kajeno mme ba akgela dipalesa ka hara lebitla la mofu Chris Hani letsholo lona le itshwere ka mokgwa o babatsehang haholo ka mokgwa o motho a sa lebellang hore letshwele le lekana-kanana le ka itshwara ka ona mme ke thapedi ya rona bohle ba teng kwano hore tle re ha re phatlalla ka mora mosebetsi ona kgotso ena e bonahalang setsheng sena se kgutsitseng lelapeng le letjha la Chris Hani e ka nnamela ditseleng tsohle tsa rona ke mofumadi wa hae Dimpho Hani ya tshwanetsweng ho tlotlwa ka boitshwaro ba hae bo e le mohlala ho mafumadi ohle Afrika Borwa.
And there you have various members of the family, including his father Gilbert Hani, sprinkling ground over the coffin, which is now in its final resting place.
Bonke ababangenayo lusapho lwakwaHani logqiba ugalela umhlaba ngumntakubo tata kaChris igama lakhe nguVivian. Kubuhlungu mawethu aphelile amaphupho kusapho lwakwaHani bayamshiya ubebemthanda uThixo ubebanikile uThixo uphinde wathatha samane sisitsho de sihambe apha sithi umphefumlo wakhe wanga ungaphumla ngoxolo.
Noxolo ona ke motsotso o bohloko haholoholo lelapeng la ha Chris Hani haholoholo ha setopo sa mofu o bona hore jwale se phomotse moo se kekeng sa hlola se tswa teng empa re a tseba hore moya wa Chris Hani moo leng teng wa phela ke ba lelapa bao ba haufiufi le lebitla le ahlameng la Chris Hani.
While this rather intimate family moment takes place, thousands are already starting to leave the South Park Cemetery, presumably heading towards the Hani home in Dawn Park. Nelson Mandela,
family have just paying their last respect, through flowers, soil, and the president of the ANC is doing so now. The General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Behind him, the President of COSATU, the Deputy President of the African National Congress is the next one, followed by none other than Comrade Oliver Tambo, the National Chairperson of the African National Congress. Followed by the Commander-in-Chief, Commander Joe Molise, Jay Naidu, immediately behind him, also
those who are nearer here, can you please just give way? Immediately after Comrade J. Naidu is followed by Comrade Gertrude Shope. Spiwanyanda, the Chief of Staff. KK behind her. With Master Sulu and General Bantu Holomisa coming. Comrade Bantu Holomisa followed by commanders and commissars of MK from military headquarters. Comrade Henjo and Kinzo, both from MHQ but also Central Committee member of the South African Communist Party.
ao ke maloko a MK ao Chris Hani ka nako e telele e neng e le mookamedi wa bona le bona ba tlisa tlotla le tlhompho go lesole lena la Afrika. Monna ya ileng a tela bophelo ba hae, monna a ileng a lala a sa robala bosiu le motshehare, monna ya ileng a hlwahlwaela le dinaha kgabane ya Afrika, monna ya neng a ikemiseditse go sebeletsa e seng go sebeletswa. Chris Hani ka jeno o bewa borokong ba hae ba qetelo. Re a o leboha Tlatlamatsholo, re a o leboha wena o atla di maroba, o atla di tshweu di maroba ke o re bopa. Re a o leboha ha o ile wa re fa senatla sena ha se ba bakae ba tla tshwana le yena. Ditshweu tse kae tse wa di phetseng le rona, ho rona e karaka ke dilemo tse sekete, hobane diketso tsa hae, bophelo ba hae e tla ba mohlala ho moloko o motjha. Lefu la hae e be tlholo ho rona, lefu la hae le re tlisetse tlhompho, le re tlisetse seriti. Jwalo ka re le dipaki re bokane setsheng sena sa bafu, mme marameng a rona o keleketla dikgapha le meokgo ya thabo, meokgo ya thabo ya hore re kene tseleng ya tlholo. Ka le leng la matsatsi le rona dithapelo tsa rona di tla ananelwa. Chris Hani, ithoballe ka kgotso moo leng teng, o dule o tseba hore dikgopolo tsohle tsa hao di tla phela di phediswe.
we think that people who are fighting against peace and who are disrupting the peace processes should be isolated, I would say, isolated politically. Because in order for us to reach a negotiated settlement where we shall have elections, we need all of us to campaign for peace rather than to raise the issue of war. We feel that we've fought in this country in the past, and that fighting has resulted into a situation where all those who were involved in that fight are sitting down and discussing and talking basically about the need to install, transitional executive councils and to prepare for elections as early as next year.